With day 3 of the lockdown in effect, there is a significant police presence to keep things under control. Residents are being urged to come out for basic essentials only and continue practicing social distancing and good hygiene. SABC News reporter Abra Barbier is currently in Mount Pleasant, just outside Hermanus, monitoring life under lockdown, and we cross over to her for an update. Abra, a very good afternoon to you. Trying to give us a sense of what's happening in Mount Pleasant.
Good afternoon, Simpiwe, to you as well. Yes, we are in Mount Pleasant. We've been spending the past few hours with these gentlemen. I don't see any ladies on this team right now, but we have been with the Overstrand law enforcement guys who have been monitoring not only this area but surrounding areas as well. They've literally been taking people off the streets and putting them back in their homes. They've been stopping cars. They've been educating people. They've been doing everything that they have been told to do to make sure that people are adhering to the regulations in terms of the lockdown. So the first area we were in was Zwelichle, which is the informal settlement, which is a couple of roads down from here. There was a whole lot more activity over there, and these guys had a lot more to do over there. They actually took kids by their hands and walked them to their homes to make sure that they were safe with their parents. They chased people away who were just loitering and lingering. Of course, people who were doing essential chores outside of the house. Like many people were out looking for gas to buy. People who were going to the local spaza shops to go buy food and groceries and whatever they need for their home. They were allowed to stay on the road and do what they needed to do. But people who were just loitering, and there were many who were just loitering, these guys chased them back into the homes. I found that lots of the people who were out were older teenagers. Of course, it's very difficult to keep them confined to a specific house or area. So loads of youngsters were out on the road, and then of course little babas were out on the road as well. They did stop a few cars, explaining to people what the regulations were in terms of how they should be driving. We found a couple of cars where there were loads of kids in the car, and of course that is something that we are trying to avoid. So this is a very different picture to what we saw in Hermanus earlier on. But now you must also remember that Hermanus is a much more affluent area. People have bigger homes, they have bigger spaces to keep themselves busy compared to areas like this. And what was interesting, what I actually found out, is that people in the more affluent areas who are, going out and jogging and walking their dogs, when law enforcement and when SABC tries to talk to them about them not obeying the regulations, what they are doing is they are actually sending drones into areas like this, and they are basically spying on people in the poorer areas, in the informal areas, and they are then showing SABC evidence of these people who are out and about in the informal settlements, and using that almost as justification for them to go out and jog or run. But it's a very different story if you are in an affluent area versus an area such as this. We have people applauding the cops over there, applauding the law enforcement. We actually have seen quite a few people who gave the thumbs up to these guys, who were saying thank you to them, who were giving them a clap as they came by to say thank you for what we are doing. We appreciate what you are doing. We understand what you are doing. So you do get people who the message has, been driven home to some people. But of course, there will always be those who will always try their luck and take chances. So this is essentially what these guys have been doing for most of the day. From what I've seen, they've been doing a good job. They haven't been using excessive force. They haven't been rude. In how they are getting people to adhere and comply, they are also educating them and explaining to them. Because of course, I suppose that is something that we should all be doing, because not everybody is getting the message. So all of us should actually be trying to drive the message home to as many people as we can. Studio?
Well, Abra, in as much as it is very difficult expecting that, in some densely populated and informal settlements, where people have got houses which don't have much spaces, and if so, very, very small spaces, and some houses don't have yards, they don't have balconies. So, expecting people to be indoors for the rest of the day is very, very difficult to expect. And you just said that some of the armed forces they were so nice to the community members, they were not rude, and there was no use of excessive force. So I suppose then that we haven't seen any arrests emanating from people then who do not adhere to some of these regulations.
I didn't see any arrests today. Not as part of this operation that we are part of. Of course, we will only get the breakdown of stats later on. Those stats only come out later on in the day. But as part of this operation that we were part of, what the one gentleman did say to me was that they've still been a bit lenient. This is what I heard yesterday and today. They've still been a bit lenient because it is only day 3 and people are still trying to get to the shops. But they say they are going to be more aggressive in getting the message across going forward. And what you say about the small spaces versus the larger spaces, I mean, that is such a valid point, and that is something that we've all been talking about in general conversation on social media. Everybody's been saying, how do you keep kids who live in a shack in a very, very small confined area, how do you keep a child like that off the streets? They don't have gardens, they don't have big yards in which to play. Their only playground is in the streets. So right now, there is no accommodation for those situations. But to juxtapose that, if this virus gets into our townships, it's going to be a runaway disease. Then we are going to be dealing with this on a whole other level because of those confined spaces. So right now, we need to do everything. And when I say we, I'm talking about government, I'm talking about authorities. Everything needs to be done right now to keep it out of areas like these. Because once it gets into the flats, once it gets into the informal areas, once it gets into the shacks, we are going to have a massive disaster on our hands as South Africans. Simpiwe?
Abra, thank you so much for your update. We much appreciate it. That was Abra Barbier speaking to us live from Mount Pleasant in Hermanus in the Western